Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks so much for joining. I'm super excited to be here today and talk to you all about different tips for applying to business school. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting so far, my name is Scott Edinburgh. I'm the founder of Personal MBA Coach, and we'll talk through mastering the MBA application. We're going to cover essays, many of the top schools' essays. We're going to cover resumes, rec letters, and more. So as you have questions throughout the process, please feel free to ask them in the windows or chat boxes where you see to ask questions on YouTube, etc. And we'll go through as many of the questions as we can at the end. So we'll get started here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and the company, just as a brief sort of refresher, so you know who I am and who you're speaking with today. So have been the top ranked consultant of all time on some different leading platforms. I've spoken at the annual GMAT conference. Overall, in the last year, our clients had a 96% success rate, and actually all of our clients, so 100% of folks who applied to 6 or more schools got in, and we got over $6.5 million in scholarships. I'll actually go through some of the scholarship examples shortly. So, we're a boutique, a family-owned and operated business, and what's really interesting about Personal MBA Coach is if you do decide to come on board with us, everybody would have direct one-on-one access to either myself as the founder or a top former admissions director, and so we don't have any junior consultants on the team. So a little bit about myself. I went to MIT for undergrad, studied economics and business at Sloan, was a teaching assistant for one of the MBA courses as an undergrad. And then I worked in consulting. I worked at Deloitte in management consulting, doing mostly mergers and acquisitions across some industries, and then went to Wharton for the MBA. And I'm on the board of directors for AGAC. So plug for AGAC, that's the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. For those of you who don't know about it, definitely check it out. So we filter and have some of the best consultants as members. I'm also joined by MJ Shores, who's a former Wharton and UCLA admissions director and has been a speaker at many different events around the world as well. And I run the company with Aaron, who used to work at Bain and went to Yale for the MBA. And we have Nicole Shea on our team as well, who's a former Colombia admissions director, and she's an advisor. So, a little bit about us. So we have, let's say, different processes, right? You start with brainstorming, figure out, who you're about, what you're focusing on, what you should be covering in the process. I'll get through my whole process at the end, but we can help you throughout all the parts of the sort of life cycle, anywhere from early planning, if you're thinking through, hey, look, I'm not going to apply to school yet. I'll do this at some point in some future time period, but really just want to think through now, what can I do to improve myself? What are the different things that I should be doing to, perfect my process? How can I make myself a stronger and a better applicant? All the way through tutoring. So we do a GMAT, GRE, and executive assessment tutoring, and have some of the best tutors in the industry and a pretty robust process around the tutoring. And we have a broad team of former M7 MBA interviewers, and so these folks all used to interview at many of the different top schools. And once you get to the essay part, which again we'll get into in a minute, we have some really strong editors, and so you'll have one main consultant to guide you through the whole process, and then editors who have graduate degrees, PhDs, or professors from leading Ivy League schools. So that's a little bit about us, but let's get into the meat of the presentation, and then we'll kind of talk more about us in a little bit. So this is a sample of some success from round one from the 2021 to 2022 season. Round 1 and 2. So clients get a lot of scholarships and they get into different schools. I mean, here's an applicant who got into Columbia, Booth, Yale, and Stern with over 330,000 in scholarships. Another one focused exclusively on the M7 with Wharton, MIT, Booth, and Kellogg with 160,000 scholarships, and the list kind of goes down. So as you think through the process, there's getting into the best school, there's getting money, and then there's some combination of both. And often that's a trade-off where, okay, I got into Wharton, hey, I didn't get money, but then I got a full ride from NYU plus $20,000 stipend. We have people that are getting paid money to go to schools like NYU Stern, and so often that's a decision that you have to make. So essays. Let's talk about essays, and we're going to have some client testimonials, but we're actually going to upload files a little bit later in the presentation, and so we'll hear from them in a little bit. So essay writing is a multi-step process, right? You begin with brainstorming. What are the different things that you want to cover? For us at Personal MBA Coach, I always like to start off with a goal statement discussion. The personal story and the brainstorm is pretty crucial, but even more than that, right? What are you doing with your MBA? Like, what are the goals? And being able to succinctly explain those is quite important. And sometimes people have different grandiose ideas and plans, and they want to go and save the world, or move from banking to some NGO nonprofit leadership role. Then we start to think about, is this really tied together? Right? What are your goals, and how do your goals compare to what you've done so far? So that's the first step. And then once you get into the essays, we're brainstorming the idea. So how do the goals then translate to, okay, now why I want to go to this school, and what are the key components at your school that are going to be able to help me to get there? Outlining is important. Often our clients will outline an essay before they start writing. It's not a requirement, but often that happens where, before we're starting to do the essay, we're figuring out what are the key points. If you outline something, what you'll do is you'll actually make it easier to write the essay, and you're less likely to go wild, let's say, and go rogue, as I like to say sometimes, where you might write an essay and it's a 500-word essay, and you're writing this and you're writing that. Before you know it, you're at 750 words, not sure what to do, right? If you were to have outlined that and given yourself certain rubrics and words per section, you would not be in that situation where you're writing too much and then have to figure out really what you need to condense. So outlining is really important. Of course, drafting, editing, and proofreading. Um, so some principles, right? Answer the question that's being asked. This seems weird. I gave this point at an MBA tour event in New York and in Chicago in the last week. And look, schools are asking questions for a reason. So if you're working with an expert, like if you, let's say you hire us, okay, I can tell you what they're looking for, not looking for. We analyze these fake profiles every year with AdCom directors. We debate who's getting in. There's a lot of behind the scenes knowledge that I have based on my relationships with admissions directors. And so I might tell you to veer a little bit. But if not, if you're doing this on your own, really answer the question asked. So if a school, let's say, doesn't ask you about your goals, it's because they don't want to know. So you don't want to start in with, 4 or 5 sentences for Kellogg about why Kellogg is the right place and what you're going to do with all your leadership skills at Kellogg if they don't ask that in the essay, right? So really, really focus on the question being asked. Try to write authentically. What this means is don't write for the school, write for you. And this also means that you're going to be honest about what you've done and what you haven't done. Every year, people get into school that are not perfect, right? So people are not perfect. They have a lot that they need to improve upon. And so that's where that writing authentically comes into play. If you did something well and you're writing a leadership essay and you want to pipe in something about, hey, like this didn't go well, right? Here's what I want to learn how to do better. That's fine. Make sure that it fits with your story. What I mean by that is there's this one overarching path and goal for you. And then we're going to show that in different sections of the application. So there's this overall story. How do you package yourself well? What is your story? At the same time, let's be succinct and try not to repeat yourself. You have many different parts of the application and you have to use them wisely. Keep the language approachable. These are real people reading the essays, right? And so you're not winning a Pulitzer Prize. The goal is not to be this best writer and the most eloquently worded essay. Like that doesn't get you into school, right? So keep language approachable, have a real passionate essay that's strong. And when possible, try to pick a unique topic, and we can talk more about that in a minute. So let's talk about the essay deep dives, right? So this is a list of schools that we're going to dive in on. A lot of schools here. Now, of course, we can't cover everything, but we're going to go into a little bit of depth on some of these different schools. So Wharton Essay 1, my alma mater, go Wharton, right? So how do you plan to use the program to help you achieve your goals? I won't read the whole question. You can read the question, but this is a goals question, right? So what are we going to do? Let's establish some career context. Where are you in your career, right? What have you done so far? Talk about short-term and long-term goals. And there's certain like numbers of words for the goals for each short-term and long-term that we want to make sure to, kind of pay attention to and highlight. But we can get into more of that if we end up working together. But the point is you have to write about the goals. The goals should be really specific and they should be ownable. So you're not going to waver and say, I'd like to do one thing, or maybe another business school is going to help me to figure it out. This is your path. You've researched it, you vetted it, and now you're here because you know what you want to do. And you're going to talk about Wharton, right? Some classes and clubs and things that you want to get at. So this is a pretty straightforward essay. The second essay is a little bit more personal. They say to take into consideration your background, right? Your personal background, maybe academic background, maybe a professional background. How are you going to help the school? So essay one is like, what are you getting from the school? Essay two is how are you going to help the school? What are you going to do to give back to them? Now, without going into detailed outline of what you want to write and how you want to write it, again, that comes if you want to work with us. The high level points I would give here is to cover a couple different parts of you. Maybe one is a little bit more personal, one is a bit more professional, or maybe academic, and then show them that you've done your research. You've talked to students, and there's a clear ability to contribute to the community, and that's very important. It's easy for someone to read an essay and in 30 seconds understand if it's BS or not. Have you done the diligence? Do you know what you want to get out of the program? Are you just sort of filling in the page with like, hey, I found a few classes that I want to take? So Stanford, this is the tough one, right? What matters to you? You're not going to get the answer for Stanford in this webinar, and I'm sorry if you were looking for that. I certainly don't want to disappoint you. But everybody has a different answer here, right? And my goal of having this webinar is to show you how to start to think through this, so you can then continue the process on your own, or with an advisor, to try to get a strong essay. So what's driving you? What's a passion of yours? How are you unique from others? Like what's shaped you? When they say what matters most to you and why, they're not looking for you to write about Stanford. You really shouldn't write about Stanford here in this essay. I mean, if you do, could be fine, but certainly not a direction that I would, give anybody. This is about you. Like, what is the one thing that is important to you, and why is it important to you? But as you're thinking through, right, there's a what and why. Let's give an example of let's say if we have some like really interesting nonprofit leadership work that we've done where we're helping out develop better schools in India. And you might say, oh, if I had that, I wouldn't need your webinar. Fine. But let's say that's one thing we're doing. And then we also have, let's say basketball. And basketball is the passion. That's what matters to you. I mean, you live and breathe that sport. And so if you're being honest, like that's what you're going to write about. You're going to write about basketball and why basketball matters to you. But you don't have really impressive things to write about basketball, And so maybe I say, hey, I know basketball actually matters to you more than helping these kids in the schools, but the second one's going to sound more impressive, right? There's more that you've done. There's more that you've accomplished. You're able to show yourself as a leader, more working on these schools in this disadvantaged area. And so maybe that becomes what matters most to you. So it's kind of tricky. I don't want to say not to be genuine, right? Because that would contradict myself. You do want to be genuine. At the same time, we have to show what you've done around this genuine item to fill up these 650 words. So, the strong answer, right? It's going to balance why and what. And this is important because the what is great, right? But then the why. Why is basketball there? Why are these schools there? Like, what is it about you that's going to convince somebody that this is really the right approach for you? And speaking from the heart is important. Try not to be too boastful though in this essay, right? This is about a theme. What matters to you? That's the question. So if you write a whole essay about all the great things that you've done around like mentoring companies or something, and then at the end it's like, oh, mentoring companies is important. I think you're losing the forest from the trees, right? This should be about the actual item that's important, supplemented by the things that you've done, to demonstrate leadership around that item. Okay, then the second essay, why Stanford? So 400 words, this is a short goals piece. It's always interesting because some schools have you write more, some schools don't have you write about goals at all. But 500 words is a quote, let's say standard length. And so now how do you cut it down to 400? What are you losing? I would say you're losing a little bit of everything, where you have some brief professional context, maybe not a ton. You're discussing your goals. Maybe you lose more on goals here than anything else. Because honestly, Stanford is not that concerned about your goals. They're just not. I mean, most people that graduate from Stanford do fine and get a good job. So it's not like they'll evaluate you and, oh, if your goals are not good enough or they're not clear enough, like you won't get it. It's actually least important to Stanford. Now, that said, you obviously should have a good path. It shouldn't be like a bad path. But I wouldn't overthink it too much or write too much about that in this essay. So you're just going to sort of reference the goals and write a little bit less content maybe than you might for another school. And then like, how's Stanford going to help you, right? So what are the things that you want to do on campus? But it's more than just a club. You want to show them that you understand a lot about the school and that you can really prove that there are certain unique things that you want to get out of the program. So that's a bit about the Stanford essays. Um, so we'll talk about Kellogg here. Kellogg has a first essay. It's all about leadership, So recent. What does recent mean? Provide a recent example. Well, recent is within the last 2 to 3 years. Can you go older than that? Sure, you can. I don't think that's recent. And so you want to have something that's going to show them what you've done today, last few days, last few years, to demonstrate leadership. And so this is a four-part question. You're demonstrating leadership, you're creating value, you're facing challenges, and you're learning. 4 things in 450 words. It's a lot. There's no rule around professional or extracurricular. It's really whatever you think is going to work best for you. And you want to think about this like a situation, action, result. And so this is a story. This is a little bit more personal. You're telling them what you did, how you did it, what the results were, and it's one story, one time. So don't write about Kellogg, etc. So we'll go to essay 2, and then I might pause the PowerPoint to upload a video so that we can show you a little bit about what some folks have said about working with us in case you're curious. Then we'll come back to the presentation. So essay 2 is about values, right? Values guide you in your life and work. What values are important to you and how have they influenced you? Now, you might say values don't guide me. Okay. Well, then you might not be a good candidate for Kellogg. So let's convince yourself that values do guide you so that you can write this essay, right? So select values that you've demonstrated throughout your life, right? It's not like, oh, I just decided I'm really interested in, diversity and people are talking about that. So let's cover that, but then I haven't really done anything around diversity in the past. So while that might be important to the world, it might not be so important to you. So make sure that this is honest. I mean, maybe you have an athletic value. I tend to have a little bit of creative license when it comes to describing values. But most importantly is how this bullet here, right, show how you've integrated them into your life. And that's really, really important. This is a tough one. This is one that's going to require the brainstorming, the analysis. This is not the sort of quick cookie cutter essay. But make sure to pay attention to life and work here. Okay, well, I don't have video from this guy here, but this is on our website if you want to learn more about what people have done and what they say about us. We have a lot of client testimonials on our site, and that guy actually got into Harvard and a dual degree program. So I'm going to share a video file right now and see if this works. This will just take a quick second, and we'll hear from. Okay, so so we do have Sid. Okay, so let's see if we can hear from Sid.
In my interviews, the advice the feedback that I consistently received was you need to be yourself, and you need to believe in yourself that your story is good enough and your qualifications are good enough to go where you want to go. So I think that in turn, that authenticity brought out a sense of confidence that helped me during my interviews.
Okay, so that's from Sid, and again, he got into Harvard in a dual degree program. I'm going to share one more clip, and then we're going to go back to the rest of the presentation. We'll hear from Courtney a little bit about her experience.
Probably in the application itself was for the essays. I had no idea that I had to be so specific. I thought I could write the high level, here's what I've done and here's what I hope to do. But knowing that you have to be literally, here are the classes I'm going to take, and I think they will fill these gaps, and this is how, this is the clubs I'll join and what I'll contribute at a very specific and tangible level. I would have never thought to bring the essay in that direction. And then it ended up being, the best way to showcase that I had a good grasp on my strengths and weaknesses and what I want to get out of the program. And I would have never thought that would have been the best way to communicate it.
Okay, great. Okay, so moving on here. So Chicago Booth essay 1. Okay, so what's interesting about Booth is there's no limit. And by the way, so Courtney is at Wharton. So there's no limit here. So what does that mean? I think it means something different to everybody. We usually do about 500 words here, but how will Booth MBA help you achieve your immediate and long-term post-MBA career goals? This is going to be similar to Wharton, as we just talked through, but Booth is different. So what you want to do here is show them, and I won't tell you exactly what to write, and everybody's going to write the same thing. But show them something that demonstrates you know about Booth, and there are real specific things that, I don't know, let's say Wharton and Columbia don't have. And that's really where I see some people struggle, is with that level of detail and clarity. And that's what was just mentioned in that last video. But at the end of the day, showing the culture is important, and this is a goals essay. Now, the second essay is a lot harder. They say, tell them something about who you are, right? So very, very open-ended, 250-word minimum. Again, no maximum. This one might be a little bit shorter than the first essay. Something about who you are. What does that mean, right? I'm a nice person. I like doing something. Is it something like a passion? Maybe it's a value. Maybe it has something to do with leadership that you've done, with extracurriculars. I think you can kind of get carried away in different directions. And what's really challenging about this essay is sometimes there's a tendency to say, okay, here's something great that I've done. I'm going to write it here. And if you do that, I think you miss the point of this essay, right? Because the wording is, tell us something about who you are. So let's say you saved, 2 African nations, okay? That's great, but if you write about it, that's not actually answering the question, right? So you have to have this careful, nuanced balance between writing about something that's impressive and strong, and also being honest about what this means about you. And they do want to genuinely find out about you and know who you are. And of course, part of that is like what you've done, but that who you are part is really tricky. The last thing I'll say here is this bottom point, right? Be focused and succinct. Something, right? This does not tell us some things. This does not tell us your whole story. So one thing about who you are, that's all that you want to get out of this essay. And so once you think about all these different points, it's going to make it harder to do. And of course, you'll need some help. You'll need to brainstorm and come up with ideas and that sort of thing. But really, really be focused here for that one particular thing that you want them to know. MIT has a cover letter, right? If we were in person, and often I do talks in person, raise your hand if you've written a cover letter recently. And people are like, what's a cover letter? Or someone says, I just wrote 7 last week. But you're writing a cover letter and you're seeking a place at MIT. So let's pretend MIT is your employer, and you want to get a job there. And the job is to be a student, right? That's what you're doing. You're writing a cover letter for why you should be hired to be a student. And so what are students supposed to do? Right? If I'm writing a cover letter for a job, let's say I want to work in consulting. I want to work with McKinsey. And McKinsey asks for a cover letter. Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to think about, okay, what are some things that they would want me to be good at, right? I'm not going to write a cover letter to explain about my experiences in cooking, even if I'm like the world's best chef, because that doesn't matter to McKinsey. Maybe it does. I don't know, but probably doesn't, right? So what are the things that I need to do to be a good consultant, right? Those are the things that I'm going to write in that cover letter. And so similarly for MIT, right? What is a good student? Like, what are things that you want to do as a student that would be good? And then you have to sort of think backwards and say, okay, well, now what are the topics I'm going to cover in this cover letter? What are some things maybe that I've done in the past? And how am I really going to contribute to Sloan? How am I going to make Sloan better? Now, I'm purposefully talking through this in a somewhat vague fashion because we have a specific direction at Personal MBA Coach that's like pretty detailed for how to answer this. And we won't go into all those details, but I will give you some initial really helpful tips as far as how you should think about this cover letter. And hopefully that helps you to start down the path of like, okay, well, now if I want to write this, what am I doing? At the end of the day, you are obviously telling them things about what you've done so far. And based on those things, now why you would be a good student at Sloan. So this is a very different piece. I would say this is the most difficult essay to write. And some people disagree. They think, well, Stanford is more difficult. Stanford is hard to come up with a good topic. But once you have a topic, it's actually not that hard to write. What matters most to you? I'm just writing about something. This is arguably the hardest essay to write without having the proper guidance and support because it's a very different piece. And so hopefully this helps you to start to think through it. So some initial tips here, right? Don't just list what's in your resume. Keep the values in mind, right? And think about your most significant accomplishments. Harvard. So as we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School MBA program? Very open-ended. Some people say, hey, this kind of sounds like Booth. Is it? I don't know. Let's go back and look. What does Booth say? Okay. Booth says, use this opportunity to tell us something about who you are. Okay. And Harvard says, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy? Certainly could be the same topic. Is it though? I would say it's usually not. It's usually more. So you could have a similar theme, but this is bigger. I mean, for one thing, you have 900 words here. So you have more space. You're not writing 900 words for a booth. Or if you do, you've misjudged. So yeah, you might talk about something that you've overcome. You might talk about a hobby that's turned into your career. Keep in mind that this essay should be exciting. This is not a like cookie cutter, here's what I'm going to do, here's how the school is going to help me kind of a thing. You don't just want to toss everything in here, right? This should be personal and unique. You can cover goals if you want. You can cover why MBA. You can cover why Harvard. But I usually don't recommend that. It's not something that makes for a good essay. And we have many conversations with Harvard, AdCom and personally and others from my team to really get a sense for like what they're looking for, what's working, not working. And we also analyze essays. So look at the last 15 essays that worked and then figure out, okay, based on that, what do we want to do? How should we guide our clients through this process? This is definitely on the harder end of essays. But they have a 900 word limit, right? And this was inserted to try to stop the super long, crazy essays. So people used to write sometimes really 1,500 words, 1,300, 1,600, like crazy stuff that you just don't need to do. So they put 900 in there and say, hey, this is where you want to stop. Like if you're writing more than that, you've missed the boat. If you want to write 600 words and get in, absolutely will that happen this year. So you don't have to fill up the 900 words. It just depends on the essay and what it is that you're covering. And every additional word that you write should be needed. So don't just fill up the page simply to do so. That said, I think most people will because it's, the tendency is to write up to the limit, and that's fine. But just make sure that it's really strong and it shows leadership, right? It shows impact. Harvard wants leaders. They educate leaders. They want leaders. And so you have to think about that leadership and that impact along the way. So Colombia, we have a clear sense of your professional path to date. What does that mean? Ding, 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 ding. Do not rewrite your resume in this essay. They see it. They don't want to see it again. What are your goals over the next 3 to 5 years, and what's your long-term dream job? So what's different about this is they don't ask about Colombia here, right? And so you kind of want to know that, right? Now, we have a slight interest in mentioning a bit about how CBS will help towards the end of the essay, but you need to get guidance from someone on how to do that and how much to cover so that you make sure to do it right. Most of this is goals, right? So stay logical. This is not the time to say, like, I'd like to take Jeff Bezos's job and run Amazon. That's my dream job. Like, have this be a realistic dream job. And, goals are typically in the kind of 7 to 10 year time frame. So essay 2, why do you feel Colombia is a good fit for you academically, culturally, and professionally? Those are 3. That's a lot. How am I going to cover all that in 300 words? Well, first of all, do your research, right? Come up with some different things that you should write and maybe have 3 to 4 offerings. Maybe it's 1 professional, 1 academic, 1 culture. I don't particularly love using professional too much in these, and we do very well. I mean, we send lots of people to Colombia every year. I think it's better if this is a little bit more personal. You're having something New York focused, okay? You're having something about feel and fit. You're obviously referencing your goals, but you have a nice mix. And that way they see that you've done your research. And there's certain things, by the way, which I won't get into today because of time, certain things you need to do when applying to Colombia in order to get in, as far as like demonstrating interest and that sort of thing. It's not a level playing field. Some schools really need that interest, and there's certain events that you need to do and numbers of students you need to talk to and that sort of thing. And other schools, they don't have that. So, make sure that you have that guidance from somebody so that you don't just invest all your effort sort of evenly across the schools. Book, movie, or song, right? What's the favorite? I like Home Alone. I would say I don't know if that'd be my favorite movie of all time, but it's certainly, it tops the list. But I wouldn't write about that in this essay because what does that mean? A young kid who, sets booby traps for burglars to not get into the house. If you haven't watched Home Alone, go and watch it. It's a fun movie. But I'm not going to write about that here because that doesn't tell them something impressive about me. So you have to pick something that's personal, pick something that's real, but also like, what are some things that I'm trying to highlight? It might make sense to reverse engineer this essay, and rather than just picking a book and saying, okay, like this is actually the book that I like most. Think about what you want to tell them about you. How are you getting yourself across? What are you not conveying in the other essays? And from there, trying to find a book or movie or song that kind of resonates. Okay, so the MBA resume. what's the difference between an MBA resume and a professional resume? So first of all, professional resume is going to show employers that you are able to do the job. So why would you do a job? You have skills, you have experience, you have leadership ability, arguably skills as well. You have intellect, you're smart, you're successful, et cetera, et cetera. Business school resume is just focusing on your future potential. So there's no specific job that you're applying for when you're applying to business school. You could do any job. And so you just want to show them that you have a history of demonstrated leadership, and that you will be a good leader once you come on campus. You need to prove that you've done your job better than others, or maybe just better than the expectations of the job. And so what that means is you don't want to get as detailed in MBA resume as a professional resume. I looked at 80 resumes in Chicago last week, and didn't give super detailed feedback on all of them, but in case any of you are watching now, hopefully it's enough that was able to help you a little bit. But arguably, I would say the most common piece of feedback that I give in a resume is to just explain things better, right? Because the reader is not your boss. I mean, they might not be in your industry. They might not know what you're talking about. And if they do know, they might not need to read all those details. So just focusing on trying to explain things a little bit more succinctly and in a stronger way is going to be really important. So what does a resume look like? Okay, I work at Cool Services Company. You can tell this is an old template we've used for a while, 2013 to present here. But look, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to have experience here. It takes up maybe half the resume, maybe a little bit more. You have different bullets, 1 to 2 lines for most bullets. You don't want a whole bunch of one-liners, nor do you want a paragraph. I see some resumes that have 3 or 4 sentences in a bullet, and they sort of just missed the boat here, right? The resume is going to be scanned over briefly. An admissions director might not even read the resume for as long as I've been talking about resumes. And so you want to make sure that it's approachable, it's easy to sort of navigate through, and you're highlighting the proper items. So what do you want to do? Highlight your strengths, right? Show leadership, impact. So when you can, have specific and measurable results. And I think that's going to be really important. Establish key skills, right? So what are you doing that's better than others? And prove that you did your job better than others and better than expectations. Pause a little bit to catch my breath here. I overcame COVID, I think it's like almost 2 months ago, but still have like a little bit of shortness of breath, so apologies. So resumes. I've seen 1,200 resumes. It's got to be more than that. I mean, if you just take people that we've talked to versus worked with, some combination. Anyway, a lot of resumes. None of them are great. I wrote here only a few were great without needing to edit. I haven't seen anything in the last 2 or 3 years. And it's not because people aren't good at writing resumes. It's just the MBA resume is different. So you really have to focus on modifying it and also probably improving it at the same time. One page resume. So if you're applying to an executive program, any more experienced executives out there, 2 pages is fine. But if you're applying to a full-time program, absolutely 1 page, hard limit. Do not submit anything longer. Let's avoid industry jargon, right? And we're ensuring that the skills and accomplishments are presented here. Deal breakers, bolded words. Sometimes I see bolded words. I see different sections and boxes. We don't want that. I know in certain markets they have boxes and they have bolded words, and that's common, not for business school. So no bold, besides maybe the title name or dates or something like that. And also another pitfall is like a too little white space, right? So you want to use the resume wisely. So let me go back to this for a second. So this would have filled up the page. So the bullet goes all the way over to here. Maybe there's a second bullet 2/3 of the way in. And that's kind of what the resume is going to look like. Okay, rec letters. Start to think about your rec letter strategy, right? What does that mean? Ask somebody who will write an amazing letter. That's what's important. The second bullet is to ignore title. So if you look at both of those things together, what does that mean? It means I'm not asking the partner of the firm that doesn't know me that well, just because they happen to have gone to X school or they happen to be a partner of my firm. Make sure they've worked with you for a while. What does that mean? Someone asked me this in New York on Saturday. Look, I mean, 6 months minimum is my hope. But if you're doing a lot of different consulting projects and you're moving around and, you might not have, someone that you've worked with for 6 months, and that's okay. But if you do, that's ideal. What else, right? Start doing the things that you want written about. So think about this like I call it the buttering up phase. If I want to get something from somebody, right, I might try to be nice or helpful to them at first. Um, they're more likely to want to help you if you help them. And then if while you're being nice and helpful, maybe if that also comes along with doing work for them that's going to be like impressive, okay, then you're tackling this fourth bullet, which is start doing things that you want written about. You could ask non-professional references if you have really strong extracurriculars. It's not that common, to be honest, so I usually don't recommend it, but it's definitely possible that you have a strong extracurricular and that you want to ask, someone who's a non-boss or non-former boss. Ask early. If you're applying round one, ask today, tomorrow. I mean, it's getting up there. So I would definitely ask right away. And that way they have time. Now, there are these influential notes, alumni notes. Everybody should do those. I mean, if you have someone who knows you and they're a Kellogg alum and they're willing to write something for Kellogg or Booth or whatever, definitely take advantage of that. But if you don't worry about it too much. What makes a good rec letter? 4 things. Probably more, but let's talk about 4. Specificity, right? They're going to compare you to other people. How have you grown? Okay. Recency. Make sure that they're not old. I talked about that one already. Honesty. Quality is very important, right? Now, what I mean by this is like you want to do good work, so that's crucial. But at the same time, you're not perfect, and that's okay. Business schools don't want to take perfect people, honestly. Like they want to take people that are good, strong, but that want to learn, want to grow. I was actually talking with an HBS professor recently, because we have some near me, about the class makeup and how the class makeup is changing from year to year. And one thing that's important is to have someone who's, let's say, honest about themselves, honest about what they want to do, how the school is going to help them, and to have a recommender be honest about what things that they're good at and not good at. So sometimes the recommender is able to really lend credence to someone's application, but sometimes it hurts them, to be honest. So you really have to be strong and clear about picking a recommender. Okay. Rec letter, the detail is important. I do get questions every once in a while, like, oh, can the recommender just write the same letter for every school? No, it cannot. Is it okay if the rec letter is longer than the limit? No, it is not. Okay, maybe 100 words, 50 to 100 words, but like they give rubrics for a reason. So pay attention and make sure that the recommender is detailed and can pay attention to. That's a reflection on you, how the recommender asks. So save time for the last minute items. They're going to take longer maybe than you think. So short answer questions, that's really crucial. Share your essays with your recommenders if you want. You don't have to. A lot of people don't do it, but if you want to, it's great. And have someone else proofread. I mean, even at Personal MBA Coach, where I have the best editors in the industry, you can work with me or one of my consultants. We have a proofreading team, right? And that's just important because you want someone different to look over everything and make sure that it's as strong as it can be. So we're not doing other testimonials from a technical standpoint, but here's an applicant that got into Columbia, Yale, SOM, and Berkeley with a lot of scholarships. Okay, so mistakes to avoid: having illogical career goals. If you're standing out at the window and you're like, I want to be a ballerina, that might not make sense for you. Or maybe it does, I don't know. But your goals should make sense, right? Be a logical connection. If you're switching industries or switching functions, that's fine. But if you're switching everything, make sure that there's a reason for why you're switching that, and that you can explain that. So be decisive, be specific with your goals. So yeah, the CEO, right? Forget about the CEO. I mean, unless they've worked with you really closely, you don't have to focus on the title in the rec letter. Not including school specifics. So what does this mean, right? So let's think about, I don't know, Wharton, for instance, right? And they say, what are your goals and how will Wharton help you to accomplish these goals? So in this case, I'm going to try to avoid a, quote, vague statement that could apply to any school, right? I want to be very clear and very specific and detailed about why that school is going to be right for me and what I'm going to get out of that program. Don't compliment the school. I'll highlight. Let me test out this highlighting tool. Where did that go? So I'll pen. Here we go, pen. So do not compliment the school. Super important, because one of two things happens when you do, right? One is the school kind of knows that you're like writing something that they're good at already, and so it's it doesn't really help anything. Or two, um, maybe they're not good at something, right? And it's possible that you write something healthcare, something about the healthcare group or whatever, and they're like, you know what, that's actually not a strength of ours. Then it could just come across as maybe disingenuous. Show your research, show that you've done your homework and you know kind of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And then talk about why you want to add unique value to their campuses. Okay, so mentioning a vague reason for wanting an MBA, right? It's more than just checking the box. I mean, there should be something about the program that's right for you. You want to talk about what you're going to gain from the program and also what gaps you have and the specifics about how the school is going to help you the gap. This is not about business. I don't want to go to school to learn business fundamentals, strong fundamentals, or develop business knowledge. That is super vague and doesn't tell me anything about you. So you really want to be clear about the things that you want to do. Consistency, right? These are puzzle pieces, right? They should all match together. I'm teaching my daughter how to do puzzles now, so that's fun. Look, it could be a big puzzle with many pieces, or it could be a small puzzle with a few pieces. Let's go with the small puzzle. You're a toddler putting together puzzle pieces. This is not the huge 100-piece puzzle, because what happens is you want someone to read the application, understand you, right? Figure out what it is about you that's exciting, and then have a clear story to tell someone. I might read, if I'm an admissions director, I might read 10 applications in one afternoon. It's a lot. How do I remember you? Who is Scott? Who is this guy, right? What is he about? Why am I bringing him on campus to Wharton? And so you definitely want things to be as genuine and unique as they can be. So our clients got $6.5 million in scholarships last year. We send people to all the top schools. We do MBA. We do specialized masters. I was at a specialized masters fair this past week. Public policy, government, law, etc. And we do U.S., Europe, and some Canada as well. So, we can help you throughout the whole process, right? For those of you just joining, early planning. So early planning is like, hey, I'm not applying yet. I don't know what I'm doing. Give me guidance. Tell me what I should do. Do I need to start an organization? Do I try to get on the board of an existing one? Help me figure out what my plan is. That's early planning. Of course, the comprehensive package is that covers the whole process from figuring out your story, developing the essays. You see our essay guides. We'll talk through strategies for what you need to do for each individual school, and things are very, very custom. And then tutoring. If you want some tutoring, we have the best tutors in the industry, in-house software that you can use to guide through the sessions with modules, sample questions, thousands of answers. We'll be on a wait list pretty soon for tutoring. So if you want anything, reach out and let us know. And of course, we can help you throughout the whole process. So this is the process flow. I won't go into all the details because some of this just gets covered in an initial kind of consultation call. But tutoring, then we're doing the brainstorming, right? We're figuring out what your story is about, selecting the schools based on personality and fit, career prospect, chance of getting in, and pretty detailed editing of everything throughout the process. So if you want to work with us, reach out and I can give you a lot more details sort of private offline about how it all works. But here's my contact info, scott@personalmbacoach.com. The website is personalmbacoach.com. Whether you're working with us or not, we have a lot of materials on our site. So visit the site. It'll be well worth it. These are some really, really helpful guides. Everything is free. You can watch videos of me interviewing the Columbia Business School head of the Executive Residence Program. Okay, what was that interview like? We interview other admissions directors. You can read a lot of downloadables, that sort of thing. So browse the site and check it out and see what it has to offer you. Okay, so now we will go to the Q&A section. And feel free to ask questions along the way. Okay, so hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Okay. So here's a question. I have a 2.3 GPA and have a really heartfelt cover letter to explain the extreme adverse events at the time. Can I compensate with work and good GMAT, or should I do an MS first? So that's going to be tough. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say, yeah, we'll definitely get you in, right? That's going to be tough. And I think that I need to see the whole profile and your situation before weighing in on that. That's a pretty low GPA. So it's possible that it works out at some good schools, but I think that we really have to evaluate everything first and then guide you through the right approach. Is it full-time? Maybe we wait and we do an executive. It's definitely something that we can explore together. Okay, so then we have, I've worked for over 30 blockchain projects as community manager and working on improving my profile. Happy to wait and just apply, but just want to understand if I can consider an MBA. So I think you can consider it, sure. Maybe a part-time or executive program might make the most sense. But yeah, certainly something that we can talk about offline. So here's a question. I have a goal for getting in an industry not in my native country. Okay. Can I mention this in my application? Would it seem ambitious? I think you can mention it, sure. I mean, why not, right? You're going to school to do better things, to expand yourself and be stronger. And one of those things might be just joining a new company, right? Joining a new industry. So I think that's perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. And a new location. Okay. How can candidates best highlight that they plan to pivot to entrepreneurship after working in tech without appearing undecided? Well, I mean, depending on what you're doing now, you could say short term is tech, right? Short term could be like a tech product role. And then maybe long term is entrepreneurship. Once you learn enough at the company, you can then take those skills and sort of expand elsewhere. So I think that could be a plan. If I'm taking GMAT waiver, how about my chances to get taken up by MBA? So I don't know enough about you to answer that question. And so I would say, if you want to explore working with us, shoot an email, and we can kind of go over things. But look, I'm not a fan of the waivers. I think that, well, I know that a lot of people get in without them, even though they have the waivers. And then in certain markets, it's going to vary. Like I will say, in India, the GMAT waiver is very, very unpopular, and so a lot of people have a high GMAT. And if I have like no information from somebody, and I have a good GMAT score, the good GMAT score is going to win out. But if I have bad information, like let's say you take the test and you get a 530, okay, well then yeah, let's waive it, right? Because that's not a good score. But I'd always recommend having a test if possible. I think that's going to make you stronger. Yeah, I mean, full-time, part-time. So I think we need to go over your background sort of offline, and then help you to figure out what the right approach is for you. Okay, so I know there's a question coming across now. So what aspects really stand out for scholarship considerations? Are there separate essay requirements for financial aid? Okay, so that's a great question. So scholarships, you want to focus on test score. You want to focus on strength of the application, right? How good of a story are you looking to present? Based on that, that's going to dictate, how much scholarship you might get. But there's a whole process that's going to start, you know, differently by each school, right? And some schools have like the same budget in round one and round two. Some schools have more money in round one, so that's going to vary. So about waivers, yeah. So let me clarify how waivers work, right? So you can apply for a waiver, and they might grant it. If they grant it, it means you are able to apply to the school without having a test score. It doesn't mean that they'll accept you. It's way easier to get in with a test score, and there were a lot, and I know because we did. I don't think it's public, so I don't think I can share the numbers. But I had conversations with some of the schools you mentioned to ask them the percentage of people that got in with a waiver, and those that had a waiver and did not get in. So getting the waiver from the school doesn't mean like, oh, academics are perfect, we will now accept you if you like everything else. You could still be matched up side by side with somebody, and if they have a 750 and you have a waiver, it's possible they get in above you. Now, not saying that will happen or won't happen, but it certainly is possible. So again, like my strong recommendation is to take a test, but we do get people in with waivers every year. It just depends on the person, and again, like the reasons for why they are opting for that waiver, and then how strong the rest of the application is. How to make an AdCom convinced that applying after 30 and for full-time MBA makes sense besides explaining the post-MBA career goals. So, look, we send a lot of people in their 30s into school, and it's definitely something that happens, and it happens pretty regularly. How can you convince them? I think it's all in discussing your timeline and sort of process plan, right? If you've sat at GE in corporate finance for 8 years, then you apply to business school, like that's not good. I mean, it's less likely to work out. But if there are reasons why you did certain things, and maybe, okay, first there was the studies, and then I started this organization, it failed, and then I did this nonprofit. Like, okay, so there's a reason why you're still here now in the game. I think that's going to be part of the process and can certainly help to increase your chances of getting in. So probably time for a few more questions if anybody has anything else. And again, so my name is Scott. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, all the different socials. We do a lot of different things. We have some like quick tips videos on Instagram. Follow GMAT Club, visit their channel. And if you have any other questions as you're going through the process, feel free to reach out and let me know. Let's see. I got one more question. Does already having an MBA and opting for a second MBA, is that a red flag for outcome? That would make it more challenging to get in. Certainly is still possible to get in. Certain schools will take a second MBA, certain schools won't. So we have second MBAs every year, personal MBA coach, and it's definitely possible to get in, but it's not. It's going to make it harder. Let's put it that way. So wish everybody the best of luck. Thank you so much for joining, and look forward to hearing from everybody soon.